In this video, I'm going to answer the question, how do I challenge an illegal search in a Georgia criminal or juvenile law case? Now, first I'm going to go over the places that we typically see these types of issues come up. Then I'm going to go through how we challenge those issues, and finally I'm going to address what happens if you're successful in challenging those issues, as well as some practical aspects that come into play. I'm Paul Ghanouni, founder and managing attorney at the teen and young adult defense firm, where we focus on protecting the futures of people who are in their teens to their mid-20s when they get in trouble with the law. This video is going to be kind of general information. It's not specific legal advice. It's not legal advice for your case. If you need specific legal advice for your case, please contact our firm for a complimentary defense strategy meeting so that we can go over your case and get an understanding of the help that you need. One of the first questions that typically comes up is, what are we talking about when we're talking about illegal searches or seizures? So typically what we're looking at in this scenario is, like, was the officer's initial contact with a person lawful or not? What types of things did the officer do as far as searching? Did the officer seize anything or anybody? And the legality of those. So that could be things like if you have contact with law enforcement, if they just walk up to you and start talking to you, if they pull you over, did they have a lawful reason to pull you over? If they ask to search your car, did they have a lawful reason to do that, or search your house or search your bag or anything else that you have? If they ended up searching and finding things, like what types of things they may have found. If you're under 21, for example, and they found alcohol, what kind of issues can come out of that? If they found illegal drugs, if they found other evidence of a crime, those are all the types of things that you could see in a search and seizure type situation that would need to be addressed with a motion to suppress, which is the mechanism that we use in the court system to try to challenge illegally seized evidence or illegally seized people as well. So what we do in those types of situations, if you're wanting to challenge an illegal search or an illegal seizure, you end up filing a motion to suppress, which is a formal court document in the court case to challenge the search or the seizure. And those have to be filed within 10 days of arraignment, which is typically that first court date that you get. So it's really important to make sure that those are filed timely. Otherwise, you could potentially waive the ability to challenge those types of issues. And if once you file that type of motion, there's generally a hearing that's held where the prosecution has to prove that the search or the search or seizure was in fact lawful, and that the evidence is admissible in court. A judge hears that, not a jury, and the judge decides, does the judge think as a matter of law the evidence was either legally or illegally searched or seized? From there, the question that typically comes up is, well, what happens if the evidence was illegally seized or if there was an illegal search that was conducted? So the real issue that it comes down to there is that what ends up happening is anything that was done illegally, that evidence is thrown out of the case. It doesn't mean that the whole case is thrown out unless that evidence is the entire case. So for example, if a law enforcement officer lawfully pulled somebody over, then they ended up searching the car and that person was under 21 and they found alcohol in that car, and what you do is do an analysis of the entire thing. If it looked like, okay, the stop of the car was a lawful stop, there was a legitimate issue with the vehicle that led to the traffic stop, there's not going to be a way to challenge whether the stop was legal or not, then the officer ended up searching the car. Perhaps the search of the car was not legal and then found the alcohol that was in the car. So if that was the case and the judge found that the search of the car was illegal, then in that scenario, anything found inside the car couldn't be used as evidence against the individual who's charged. So the alcohol, for example, in that case, would be excluded from evidence. And this is kind of just a big picture overview. We can get more nuanced specific on how this all plays out depending on different situations. But in that scenario, the alcohol being thrown out doesn't actually mean the case is thrown out. Like, let's say that the reason for the traffic stop was speeding. The speeding ticket would still be valid even if the underage possession of alcohol was no longer valid and couldn't be prosecuted. Now, there's some practical aspects to this too, which is you may file these suppression motions or raise these challenges to the legality of searches or seizures that take place. But there's also prosecutors on the other side of these cases. And so if you have potential legal issues, and depending on the prosecutor in the court, sometimes you can use those as negotiating points to talk to a prosecutor and try to get to a better resolution in the case by virtue of the fact that you've said, okay, you know, Mr. or Miss Prosecutor, you have this case. I think you've got some potential problems with the search that took place. Instead of going in here where you want to go and the types of penalties that you want to see, instead, why don't you meet us here so that you don't risk the entire case being thrown out or the majority of the case being thrown out. So you got to take into account the practical aspects as well, of whether it makes sense to challenge the legality of the search, whether it makes sense to use it as a negotiating point, and ultimately that comes down to the individual goals that a person has and what they want to see happen in their particular case. Now, if you're in a situation that you think that the search or seizure that was conducted in your case was conducted illegally, whether it's an adult criminal case or a juvenile case, our team is happy to help with a situation like that. Please feel free to contact us for a defense strategy meeting to see if we can help.